of drugs. And when he came, he left house, he strayed away, and they found him somewhere. By the time he came, they brought him to the clinic where I know number of videos I have met. They said, doctor, his father, my husband is not alive, and this boy is disgracing me. I don't have money. Hello. So we must have to. People's hearts are bleeding. People are in pain. But we must do something. I expect every one of us here to make up our mind and say no. I must be a part of this movement. To ensure that Nigeria youths don't get themselves destroyed with drugs. People go for clubbing, miss different type of things and do to them. There's a need for us to change. I told them 2 days ago on the radio program, I said, if there were no drug abuse, there will not be Boko Haram. Market check in most of the country where there are wars continuously, terrorism. Check what they produce. Afghanistan, heroin. Hello. Unemployment is increasing. It's not because there are no jobs. It's because people don't have brain to create jobs. There are jobs everywhere. Can you create one? Hello. It's our system. The speakers have said everything because I'm not picking up on what they have said. Go to school. A lecturer, they call it, what do they call it? I can't remember, somebody said, they have tell us to bring 5,000 so that you pass. I'll tell them that person is destroying your future. Any lecturer that asks you to give him money to pass you, that person, if he gives you a gun, he will kill you. And because of that, people do all sorts of things. The young boys go stealing and robbing. I tell people, those who get into cults, go into drugs, and those who don't actually believe in themselves. They have no self-esteem and they need treatment. Hello. So what I'm trying to welcome us that we have been so calm and cool all these years. I know what I see on a daily basis. Young men, talented, but because of one thing or the other. But for those of us who, by one reason or the other, have made that mistake, I believe there is a way out. Hello, there is a way out. I am one of them that believe that it's not always an identity. Some people believe that as far as an identity is always an identity. I don't believe in that. And God has helped us to manage people who eventually are able to be free of drugs. So if those kind of people are here and you are ready, we can partner with you and see how you can come out and be what God wants you to be. But there must be a change in our mindsets. There will be a change in our mindsets. Part of the vision of Signet is we are going to have a leadership training center where people can be trained to use their brain to work for themselves and for the society. Hello. Because one of the reasons why a lot of people get into drugs is when you don't have work to do. When you don't have a dream. Like what Pastor said. People majors in minor and minors in major. A lot of people majors in minor and the minor in major. I won't blame you. That's what most of our politicians have shown us. But it's not an excuse that we have to continue that way. It's a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. Until you make up your mind to believe in yourself. And don't look at anybody. Have you said this? Not my uncle, not my brother, not my auntie. Who am I? Who am I? And when if you're a parent say and you are helping your children to pass, to get promotion in school without reading, you are opening doors for them to go into drugs. Because when they don't have anything to think about, all they think about is how to have pleasure. And when we get illicit money to store for them, you are actually destroying their destiny. Hello. I know I'm not saying what will make us happy, but I think that is the basic truth. These are some of the things. What you don't have. And they will live here and go there to enjoy what somebody else's brain has brought to. And when they come here, they don't know what to do. A wake-up call. Don't allow drug to destroy your destiny. You can live a fulfilled life even in this crooked Nigeria. With your brain intact, you can get a way for yourself. You can make a way for yourself. You have what it takes to be a champion. But playing with drugs can actually destroy your dream. I want each and every one of us to ask him or herself this question. What does future hold for me? with God, your future is intact. But there is a work for you to do. Anybody that teaches you pleasure without work is reversing God's order. Even the Holy Scripture said, he who does not work should not do what eat. So when our parents say everybody should go to farm, it's so that everybody should do what? Should eat. But how I wish there will be a day set out for governors and their families to first of all go to farm and farm. Then we can look at them and follow them. So when you will rise up, we'll tell our leaders, this is where we want to go. Enough is enough. Don't destroy yourself because somebody is not creating opportunity for you. Create opportunity for yourself. Thank you.
You've been well informed. I said anything that takes away your capacity to think is a killer. Anything at all that takes away your capacity to think is actually destroying you. And I want to say indeed, this is a wake-up call for every one of us. If just in the state, 50% of the youth are into drugs, by the time you take research into all the 36 states of the nation, I don't know how many percent of our youth would get to discover are on drugs. And this is actually wasting our generation. And by the time I think in 5, 10, 20 years time, when those of us who are parents now, we have been old, and the youth have become parents, what will become of our generation? If people who are drug addicts, they have their own children, what will they pass on to their own generation? So it's actually a serious issue, it's a serious matter, and I'm so glad that those of us who are here today, I know we are all capable, mothers, fathers, students, NDLEA, immigration, FRSC, and every one of us, business cycles that are here today. Please, let's not stop campaigning this message. Let's take it out beyond this world. Let's take it out to our patients, to our neighbors, relatives, everyone that we come in contact with. That is a dangerous thing to get into trouble. And I've heard very little things. And the unfortunate thing is that most of these are children or youth.
For CPN, I just had a few announcements for us. If you want to be part of this move and then want to be volunteers for the organization, you can please contact us through these 3 numbers I will call. You will protect you very soon. 0810 5625 343. 0810 5625 343 or 07030837240. 07030837240 or 08035318274. Those are our contact numbers. Just reach us. And then you can also connect with us on our different social media handles. On Facebook, our name is SIGMED International. On Twitter, we tweet at SIGMED Official. And our website is www.sigmed.org. I also want to use the opportunity to mention one of our partners in this program, Big Specialist and Diagnostic Hospital. They are a major partner in making sure today's event comes to pass. They focus majorly on issues on patients that have mental health challenges, either drug abuse or patients that actually have other mental health conditions. They are located at Am90 Road, close to Mini Campus Road, just off the faculty of law. That junction now, without junction, and without the side that junction, there is the junction that leads to the hospital. So please refer your patients there when the need arises. Okay, please, we have some questionnaires that were inserted into our bags. For those of us who have not submitted or filled or submitted them, please let's make sure we do so. It's a question on brain fat syndrome, and we need to carry out a research on that. It's just 7 questions. Let's make sure we return them. Thank you very much. We want to really appreciate everyone. Please let's put our hands together for ourselves.
I'd like us to, at this junction, arise for the closing prayers. It's a call on.
If you can follow me, I don't know how to say it. So just recite it. Oh God of creation, direct our open thoughts, guide our leaders right, help our youth to put to know, and love and honesty to grow, and living just and true, good love behind us. And to deal with it, no mercy and justice carries. Thank you very much.
Well, I believe we'll continue the advocacy, and we hope that people in power will be able to listen to us. The major problem is that mental health has actually been relegated in the hem of affairs as far as health is concerned. And some of us now in the mental health profession have made up our mind to ensure we continue the advocacy, we continue talking until they hear us.
Okay, just last week I was at the Kudu prison. I think I spoke to them for 100 emails here. They all shared experiences on drug use, and they claimed that they got these drugs from 2 major sources. The security agencies like NDLA that are supposed to destroy confiscated drugs that they sell to them, and you doctors that actually prescribe this drug. And the chemist shop owners too that sell.
Yeah, well, the major thing is that unfortunately some doctors, maybe out of ignorance, prescribe certain medications, to these young men, probably in trying to solve a problem, one problem or the other, either during surgical operation or maybe medical treatment. Well, as far the NDLA, well, I don't have much to say. I'm not part of their agency, but one thing I believe that, I was thinking this morning that agency like NDLA should actually be well funded to reduce the temptation some of them get from some of these drug dealers. And the chemists, I believe there should be proper regulations of these psychoactive substances that people use, so that it doesn't really get into some hands that don't really know the adverse effects that they might suffer if they get into using these drugs, probably for non-medical reasons.
Finally, from you, what's your opinion on the national drug policy?
Well, national drug policy, I believe, is still a work in progress, but there are a lot of things that need to, because I'm not sure the mental health practitioners are actually carried along. Because there are certain medications that are freely given by some doctors, like something like pentazocine, that are freely given by surgeons, that some of us frown at, because we believe that there are other potent analgesics that have milder both tolerance and dependence effects that could be used. But unfortunately, everybody uses his or her own discretion. But when this patient gets into trouble, most times they come back to us as doctors in mental health professions to be able to sort out their problem.
So apart from drugs, what other things that affect the mental ability of human beings?
Yes, apart from drugs, there are so many things. When we want to talk about factors that leads to mental illness, there's so much stress is part of it. Inability to manage stress the way, in a proper way is part of it. There are biological aspects of it. There are psychological aspects of it. There are also social aspects of it. And biological, well, some form of physical illness could affect the mental aspect of a person. Then psychological, what we call negative life events, which could come in different ways. It could be death of a beloved one, it could be armed robbery, it could be rape, it could be so many divorce, it could be separation. So there are so many things on the psychological aspect. Then though most times we combine psychosocial because some of them are interwoven, okay? Then the financial challenges in the country now, where many people could not really have 3 square meal in a day, also affects their mental health. So many have gone to commit suicide, so many now get into drugs and drinking of alcohol, which at least, as far as we are concerned, is not the best way to solve problems. And that's why we are also trying to advocate that when people have this type of challenges, they should look for the experts that should be able to give them, the solution to whatever their problem might be.
Okay, that's actually where my question is going. Psychiatric evaluation and the rehabilitation of addicts. Do we really have the capacity to do that in Nigeria? Because we hardly see, they call them hospital for mad people, but they are not actually rehabilitating anybody.
Yes, well, I think the major problem is that so many of such hospitals or centers are in the hands of quacks. They are not really trained. They see it as a way of making money. But there is a difference between such people and somebody who has a passion and want to make sure that his patients or client get well. There are few that one can recommend, and those ones, because rehabilitation is actually a teamwork, whereby you have both the clinical psychologists, the psychiatrists, the psychiatric nurses, social workers, occupational therapy. These are all there. And it depends also on some people's level of training. But I think the major problem is that people most times don't really seek enough information, or don't really know where to get information about going to rehabilitation. Most times they must have spent their money in several places before probably even getting to know that these people can do it. And maybe by the time they get there, then it becomes a problem in terms of finance. And rehabilitation is also something that takes quite a long period, because you're actually interested in changing somebody's mindset, trying to convince the person he can do well, even without being, by keeping from drugs. And then the other area of rehabilitation is just that, also depends. There are some that also have a problem of just dependency. But there are some that, because of the prolonged usage of these psychoactive substances, most of them might have already have had what's it called, some level of brain challenge or mental illness that actually need to also be managed very well.
Okay, so socio-economically, how has drug abuse affected Nigeria?
Socio-economically, I believe it has affected Nigeria so much. One, starting from school. Okay, the number of dropouts in schools, the number of people who come out of school and they are not employable. These people end up continue being dependent on their parents, probably who are already aging. Then secondly, drug abuse also increases the incidence of crime. Most people who go into one form of aggressive crime or the other actually are influenced by the psychoactive substances they actually use, because these substances alters their sense of reasoning and judgment. Then, in terms of crime, you know, like in terms of insurgency, in terms of crime, in terms of poor productivity in the workplace, in terms of the cost of managing these people. Because rehabilitation, for you to rehabilitate a person, probably for 3 or 6 months, it takes a huge chunk of a family finance. And this also puts stress on maybe the caregivers or the care providers or the immediate or distant family members. So socioeconomically, when we look at every aspect, you know, in our schools, in our service industries, in different areas, you know, in both the military and paramilitary, you know. So when you talk about drug abuse, I mean a lot of what is it called, stray bullet, or some of these what do they call it? I mean some of these brutal killings by policemen and whatever. I find that most times some of these policemen and soldiers probably are under one influence or the other.
Sorry, sir. Okay, before you go. Just yesterday, I saw an immigration officer motorbikes, no smoking in their hand. I've seen a lot of security agents doing that. When people that are even supposed to be law enforcers, they are even the ones breaking the law. So how do you think that people resolve this kind of thing?
Yes, I think that's what SIPMED is actually out for. We want to start talking to everybody that probably can give us a listening ear, that something drastic must be done. We need to take this advocacy to all the law enforcement agencies. We need to take it to national assemblies. We need to take it to different states and letting people know that we have to be sane. We have to have our mind, we have to have a right sense of mind for us to be able to do the right thing. The SIPMED, the motto says, be informed, think right, act right. Okay? When people don't have information and when thought process is distorted, actually the actions will most probably be wrong. So we just have to continue talking until we believe we'll be heard.
So you said brain is the most complicated organ in the body.
Yes.
So if it's destroyed, how can it be corrected?
Well, that's why if it destroys one, the brain, because it's most complicated and the way it was, I mean, the way the brain is being formed